The early history of the United States Army is intertwined with the challenges and conflicts that arose as the young nation expanded into its western territories. One of the most defining and bloody series of engagements during the late 18th and early 19th centuries were the Northwest Indian Wars. This conflict, which pitted various Native American tribes against the United States Army, was not only a fight for land, but also a battle for survival, sovereignty, and culture. The story of these battles begins in the wake of the American Revolution. With the defeat of the British, the United States now faced the difficult task of consolidating its control over lands previously held by European powers. The western frontier, specifically the Ohio River Valley and the Great Lakes region, was home to numerous Native American tribes, each with their own complex political and social structures. The young republic's expansion into this region would soon lead to a violent and prolonged struggle for control. The conflict began in earnest during the 1790s, following the Treaty of Paris in 1783, which ended the Revolutionary War and recognized American sovereignty over the lands east of the Mississippi River. However, the British, who had maintained strong ties with Native American groups during the colonial period, were reluctant to relinquish their influence in the region. The Native American tribes, led by figures such as Little Turtle of the Miami and Blue Jacket of the Shawnee, resisted the American incursion. They viewed the westward expansion of American settlers as a direct threat to their way of life. The first major battle of the Northwest Indian Wars occurred in 1790, near the confluence of the Wabash and Miami Rivers in what is now western Ohio. Known as the Battle of the Wabash, or St. Clair's defeat, it stands as one of the most humiliating defeats in American military history. The battle was named after General Arthur St. Clair, who led a force of approximately 1,400 soldiers, including regulars, militia, and volunteers, into the heart of Native American territory. St. Clair's mission was to crush the Native resistance and secure the land for American settlers. The Native forces, however, had their own plan. Under the leadership of Little Turtle, the Native Americans had carefully studied the movements of the American troops. They knew that St. Clair's force was inexperienced and ill-prepared for a prolonged engagement. On November 4, 1791, the two forces met in a bloody clash. The American forces were encamped in a vulnerable position, and Little Turtle's warriors, supported by Shawnee and other tribal groups, launched a fierce and devastating attack. The Americans, caught off guard and overwhelmed, suffered a catastrophic defeat. St. Clair's army was decimated, with nearly 900 men killed, wounded, or captured. The Battle of the Wabash sent shockwaves through the fledgling United States. It was clear that the Native American resistance was formidable, and that the Army would need to re-evaluate its tactics and strategies. The defeat led to a reconsideration of military leadership, and President George Washington appointed a new commander to deal with the growing crisis. Enter General Anthony Wayne, a veteran of the Revolutionary War and a man with a reputation for toughness and determination. Wayne was tasked with leading the American forces in the Northwest Territory and bringing an end to the Native resistance. Under his leadership, the Army underwent a significant transformation. He trained his troops rigorously, instilling discipline and organization that had been sorely lacking under St. Clair's command. Wayne's army, now known as the Legion of the United States, marched into the region in 1793, determined to regain control. The Native American tribes, meanwhile, continued to form alliances with the British and the Spanish, both of whom had interests in keeping the Americans from establishing dominance in the region. However, Wayne's military strategy was based on an understanding of the terrain and the need for surprise. His forces built forts along their route, offering protection for American settlers while providing staging points for future operations. In 1794, Wayne's forces came into direct confrontation with the Native American coalition at the Battle of Fallen Timbers, near present-day Toledo, Ohio. The battle would prove to be a turning point in the Northwest Indian Wars. Wayne's forces, though outnumbered, were better trained, better equipped, and more disciplined than their native counterparts. The American soldiers, armed with newly developed tactics and supported by artillery, were able to rout the native forces decisively. The battle itself was relatively short but incredibly fierce, with both sides suffering casualties. Yet the Native American forces were forced to retreat, and the victory paved the way for the eventual peace treaty that would end the conflict. The aftermath of fallen timbers was the Treaty of Greenville, signed in 1795, which marked the beginning of the end for the Northwest Indian Wars. Under the terms of the treaty, the Native American tribes were forced to cede vast amounts of land in present-day Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, and Michigan to the United States. In return, the U.S. promised to establish boundaries and recognize the remaining lands as native territories. The treaty, however, was far from the end of the struggles between the United States and Native peoples. It was, in fact, only a temporary pause in the larger ongoing conflict over land, culture, and survival. The success of the U.S. Army in the Northwest Indian Wars did not come without significant cost. The native tribes, although defeated, would continue to resist American expansion, leading to future conflicts, including the War of 1812 and the eventual forced relocations of the 1830s, such as the Trail of Tears. The legacy of the Northwest Indian Wars was one of hardship and loss for Native peoples, but it also marked a key moment in the development of the U.S. military. The battles and skirmishes that took place during this period had lasting effects on both sides. For the United States, the war shaped the Army's development, pushing it toward modernization and organizational reform. The lessons learned in these early engagements would influence military tactics for years to come, particularly in terms of how the Army approached indigenous warfare, which often relied on guerrilla tactics and deep knowledge of the terrain. For the Native American tribes, the losses in the Northwest Indian Wars were a part of a broader pattern of displacement and broken promises. While many tribes fought valiantly to defend their lands, the sheer scale of American expansion, combined with the technological superiority of the U.S. military, ultimately overwhelmed them. Their cultures, once rich and diverse, began to erode in the face of U.S. pressure, and many were forced onto reservations or assimilated into American society. The story of the Northwest Indian Wars is one of tragedy, resilience, and transformation. It is a story that reflects the broader history of the United States, one marked by conflict over land, identity, and power. The first battles of the U.S. Army in the post-Revolutionary War period set the stage for the expansion of the American frontier and the shaping of the modern military. The sacrifices made by both the American soldiers and the Native American tribes are a testament to the high stakes involved in the struggle for control over the North American continent. Though the United States emerged victorious in the Northwest Indian Wars, the cost of that victory was high. For the Native American nations, it was the beginning of a long and painful period of resistance and survival. Today, the legacy of these wars is remembered not only as a military struggle, but as a chapter in the broader narrative of the American experience, one that continues to shape the relationship between Native peoples and the United States to this day.